my serious solo. It's a funny thing, reality. Sometimes you can choose to go your entire life ignoring it, until one day you find it staring you directly in the face, asking you for another apple juice. I had never really seen myself as capable of taking care of another human being. I could hardly take care of myself. But when I think about it, I realize that Clark needed me. And in some ways, I think I needed him. Every year, nearly 40,000 cases of child abuse go without prevention. In the following selection, Molly, a young teenager who decides that if she can't fix that for herself, she's going to fix that for someone else. Presenting Ants by Clint Snyder. I took up a job as a camp counselor over the summer. The pay wasn't ideal, but neither was I. I remember one day I sat down at the table with a bunch of the kids at lunch, and Clark tugged on my shirt sleeve just to tell me that the ravioli tasted like dead cat. If there was one thing that I could say about kids, it would be that they're always honest. Not that I really consider myself an adult. I mean, I'm only 17. Maybe I'm just not that honest. But that wasn't what told me that Clark and I had been through some of the same things. He was perfect. At least he wanted to be. And I did too. Therapists will tell you that in most cases of abuse, children are more likely to skip school and fail their classes. But what they don't usually tell you is that sometimes we're the perfect ones. I remember one day, several of the camp counselors and the kids and I had gone on a nature hike. It wasn't anything spectacular, mostly just dead leaves and fallen logs. But to a 10-year-old, it might as well have been a trip to the moon. I remember Clark kept pointing out every little thing to me. All the beetles and the footprints. But he pointed out one thing to me that stood out a little bit more than the rest. It was an anthill. And I can tell you that that anthill has haunted me to this day. I stood there watching as several of the kids started stepping all over the ants who were working themselves to death just to please this thing that was under the ground. And it was eventually going to kill them. I was so angry, and I could remember Clark just coming up to me, and he hugged me. After a moment, I took the lid off my water bottle, and I poured it down the anthill. I can't be sure that it did anything, but it made me feel better. Sorry, it must sound really dumb, someone getting so worked up over an anthill. On the way back to camp, Clark tripped over some rocks and banged his knee. He kept saying that he was fine, but I could tell by the way that he was limping that something was wrong. So I sat him down and I lifted up his pant leg. Immediately I saw the fresh scrape. But under that, I saw that his legs were covered in bruises. I think the only thing that kept me from falling over in shock right then was the fact that, well, I wasn't all that shocked. I had known that this was happening, but I just kept shoving it to the back of my mind because I knew that it was just another imperfection on him. And from the way that Clark had told me about all of his medals and good grades, I knew that he was like me. And we thought that if we could be perfect and make them happy, maybe they wouldn't hit us anymore. Clark quickly covered up the bruises, saying that he was a fan of roller skating, he just wasn't good at it. Maybe kids aren't always that honest. But Clark was a good liar. And so was I. We had to be in order to tell ourselves that the lives that we were living were just like everyone else's, and that we were totally well adjusted to everything around us. But on the inside, we felt like we were being eaten away, like a mound of dirt by ants. That night, I had a dream. No, that night, I had a nightmare. I was standing on a hill watching the sunset with Clark. And as we were standing there, this dark, hooded figure came up behind us and grabbed Clark away from me. I turned and I watched as the hooded figure slapped Clark across the face, and I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I couldn't make a noise, and I was frozen in place. I watched as the hooded figure started beating Clark to death, and I felt like my insides were rotting because I couldn't move and I couldn't help him. I couldn't help him. I had had enough. The next day, I called child welfare and I told them what I knew. Because if I couldn't fix the problems for me, then I had to fix them for Clark, because he did not deserve to be treated like that. No one deserves to be treated like that. I called Clark into my cabin so I could tell him what I had done. I knew that he would be angry. I knew because I would have felt the same way if someone had done it for me. So I sat Clark down and I told him what I had done. But he wasn't mad. He just looked at me through tears and he smiled. But this was a smile of relief. It was not the same fake smile that we had been wearing our entire lives just to tell everyone that we were okay when we knew that we weren't. And through his tears, he said, "Thank you." After a while, I had asked Clark if he wanted a brownie. And, of course, him being a 10-year-old boy, he said yes. So I walked over to the cupboard and I got a brownie down. I split it in half, and as we were eating, he looked over at the ground. And there was a single ant. Strong and independent. And I watched as Clark walked over to him, and he gave him a crumb and said, "You're gonna be all right, little buddy." And for a moment, I thought, yeah, we're gonna be all right.